Well, hello everyone. This is a lecture series on English and print media for the undergraduate students of generic elective semester 3 under Kulhan University, Chaibasa. As because of the lockdown, you all are at home and we want you to be safe at home, stay at home and have these lecture series. Watch them carefully so that you are not deprived of your regular classes. I'll begin with your syllabus, and here it is. The syllabus, you can see that in Unit 1, you have to study role of language in print media and then definition of news, difference between news and information. We will also see how news is different from ideas, and we have different types of news, hard and soft news, and others that we are going to see in Unit 1. Then in Unit 2, we will try to understand what actually reporting is and what are the recent trends in reporting. And then we have different types of reporting: objective reporting, interpretative reporting, and investigative reporting, entertainment reporting, development reporting. So we will try to understand that what is the difference between these kind of reportings, and when a reporter goes into the field, what kind of precaution one has to take, what kind of measures he has to take to get the report done. And in the Unit 3, we will see that how we can write news and writing interviews, writing features. We have different kinds of journalistic writing, and that we will see in this Unit 3, which is very important for all generic elective English students. So, this will be the exercise for this entire lecture series. And one by one, we will take care of all those things. Maybe for mass communication students, it can be repetitive, but I'm sure that they are going to take proper care and will be attentive for this lecture series. See, lecture one, which I'm going to give you right now, is actually a backgrounder. So, in even in semester one, we have studied about what is communication and what is the process of communication. This time also, I'll start with what is communication and what is the importance of communication. But at the same time, we will also see that what is the importance of language in communication. What kind of role it plays in communication, and especially in print media, because it's based on language only. So this will be the flow of my this lecture, dealing with communication and then the process and then the role and of course the role in print media. Now see, what is communication? Whenever we have talked about, or whether I have asked about what is communication, I have realized that students know what is communication. In fact, everybody knows that what is communication, but it becomes slightly difficult to define when somebody asks you something which is so into you. So, the communication is the act of sharing, act of expressing yourself, act of uh, you know kind of involvement when you are looking for in the society, from the other person or maybe from other group, and then we communicate. So there are various reasons, when you want to share your emotion, when you want to impart knowledge, when you want to give somebody a certain kind of information, when you have idea and you want to share it with the others, when you have opinion and you want to talk about it. So this is actually the purpose of communication, and that is why we communicate. Now, what happens in communication, that we also need to understand, that whenever the communication is taking place, someone is sending the message to somebody. That means someone who is saying, someone who is giving the message becomes the sender of the message, and the one who is receiving it, whether it's emotion, of yours, or maybe the information which you have shared with someone, or you are trying to give the fact to somebody, that person who is receiving it, who is in the receiving end, becomes the receiver. So these three components are very, very important to any communication. That one who is sending the message can be in any form. I have already spoken about it. It could be information, it could be a fact, it could be opinion, it could be idea, it could be your emotion as well. Okay, and there is someone who is receiving it. There is someone who is trying to grasp it, trying to get it from you. And of course, that's your target also, your purpose of communication. Also, that someone should listen to it, someone should grasp it, and that's how the communication takes place. Now, these are some characteristics, some key features of communication, that it's always two-way. And we have already spoken about it, because if the elements, two elements are there, one is sender and other is a receiver, it's always going to be two-way, because receiver, it's also important that receiver is again giving you a kind of feedback, uh, uh, so that you can understand whether he has received the same communication, or he's perfectly come to know what you wanted to actually tell him. So it's always two way, it's never one way. It is very essential, and that's why if someone is speaking, on the street, maybe to oneself, so we cannot regard it communication, because it has to be two way. Secondly, it's always purposeful. Maybe the beggar who is there on the street speaking to himself, okay, but it's without purpose. So, purpose is also a very essential element of communication. That whenever you speak, whenever you try to communicate, actually there must be a kind of objective. Why you are saying, why you are speaking, why you are trying to impart that. So, what is your target? What is your objective? So, that is something which is very, very essential. Also, we need to understand that communication is irreversible. Now, see, this is the act which you cannot reverse. And that's why, all our elderly people, they suggest that whenever you are speaking, you have to be very, very cautious, because once you have spoken anything, you cannot revert it. You can say sorry always, you can apologize, that can happen, but you cannot undone this like we do in our computers. So that's the act which is irreversible. And I think the last feature which I'm going to tell you is most important, because we need to understand that communication is always contextual. Contextual means whenever you are speaking, you are speaking in some context, and that's why, every word has its own meaning, but sometimes the meaning changes because the context changes, because the circumstances changes, because the referral point changes. So we need to understand that communication is never happening in vacuum. It's happening in certain kind of surrounding, in certain kind of situation, and that situation is very much important. Okay, so we need to understand that communication is always contextual. See, this is the process of communication. I think you all know, we have done it in semester one also, that there is a sender who is sending a message, and he is sending his message through a medium or through channel, and receiver is receiving it and giving response or feedback to the sender, and this cycle goes on. Sometimes, receiver becomes the sender, and they exchange their positions when they are responding to something. So this is how this entire process of communication happens. So when I'm saying that communication is a process, that means various things are involved in the act of speaking, the act of listening, both are involved in the process of communication. If you are only speaking, it cannot be regarded as communication. If you are only listening, it cannot be regarded as communication. When the speaking and listening, both actions are at the same time happening, then only we can say that the communication is happening. And I have written two key points, if you will notice in this slide. One is the environment and other is the barrier. And I was speaking to you earlier, this entire communication takes place in a certain kind of environment, social environment, your natural environment, um, economic environment, if cultural environment, and every kind of environment has its impact on communication. So whenever we are trying to study communication, whenever we are trying to understand that how this communication can become effective, we cannot disregard this environment proportion. And then we also need to understand that the perfect communication is something, which is very difficult to happen, because we are doing this communication in a certain kind of environment, and in that particular environment we have certain kind of barriers also. Barriers may be a physical barrier, it could be you are not feeling well, so you are not in a position to listen to me properly, and that's how this communication is not taking properly or happening properly. So you are not listening me because you don't want to, you're not feeling physically fit. Other reason could be psychological, because of the corona, because of this COVID-19, and so much information which is coming on television. You are feeling afraid, you are kind of upset. So again, you are not in a position to listen to me carefully. So the communication will not take place properly. And this is another kind of barrier. Maybe some digital barrier, your mobile is not working properly, you don't have network. So, if the technical barriers are there, we call them the problem which are occurring because of the technical issues, and they also become the impediment among to people who are trying to communicate with each other. And we have also a problem of cultural barriers, because what happens is that you belong to a certain culture and you have certain notion, you have certain kind of upbringing, you have certain kind of understanding about the society. And then when you are trying to communicate with a person who belongs to a different kind of society and has raised by some different kind of people, different kind of culture, it becomes difficult to communicate. Even maybe the language can there can be a difference of language, there can also be a difference of opinions, there can be a difference of beliefs. So there are so many things which put barrier between the sender and the receiver, and sometimes it happens that communication becomes a problem. So this is the entire process of communication which takes place. And now what we will see here is the flow of message. See, when a message is there in the sender's mind, in the form of the idea or information or maybe fact, it is in abstract form. And to send it to somebody, when you are trying that it should reach to the receiver, you have to give it a concrete figure, a concrete form, a physical form. So that is why whatever is there in your mind, through language, actually you try to convey it. So language is a concrete form of your idea, right? And sometimes what happens, that language has its own limitations. Language, if the sender and receiver they are in proximity, you can say something and the receiver can listen. But suppose if they are scattered, the sender is at one place and the receivers are scattered, they are here and there, then you need a carrier, which or a transporter, um, transporter you need somebody, which can transport your idea, which you have converted in a concrete form, in the form of language, to take it to receiver to whom you intend it to. So this is the flow of the message. So from abstract, which is there in your mind, encoding is happening, you are trying to get in the idea, and you are trying to give it a form, and then you convert it into language. And when it uh, becomes the language, it could be any type of language. We will see how many types of language we have in the next slide. So we take the help of the language, any type of the language, just to give it a physical form to the message, so that it can reach to the receiver. And sometimes, when the distance between sender and receiver is far off, we have to use a kind of channel or medium or carrier, which will take this message forward to the receiver. See how many languages we use usually, and I think you all know this. We have visual language, in which we have paintings, we have posters, sound language when especially animals use it, but maybe, sometimes we also make sound just to communicate. Then we have body language. If the proximity between sender and receiver is close, then, of course, we have body language which works well, especially in interpersonal communication, as you all know. So sometimes, collectively it comes with spoken language. So body language and spoken language together, they make a strong message to the receiver. Then we have sign language, we have digital language, we have written language. So there are so many types of language. I have just, given few names. So many languages just working as the medium between the sender and the receiver to convey a message. See, uh, when we are talking about carriers, when we are talking about mediums, we have so many types of mediums available. Uh, to whom we call different media. Traditional media is there, in which we have puppet show, we have nukkad natak, we have theatre, so many things, even dance, song, they all are form of kind of traditional media, even storytelling. Then once we started uh, using language, and then the written language came into existence. This print media also came, not exactly with the written language, but once we started printing it, then it came in the form of print media. Then we have radio, television, and multimedia. Multimedia, we have computer, which is using all these mediums which were available previously, the traditional medium, print, radio, and television. So it has combined, and now we have devices which are using multimedia for conveying message to the receiver. See, this is print media, where we which is actually in your syllabus and which we need to focus on. The contents of media, print media, you will see that we have news and we have views. And to convey this news and views, what we are actually trying to study is that what kind of language uh, print media is using in its all journalistic writing, which will comprise news report, feature writing, editorial writing, and even cartoons, caption writing, headlines, lead, everything, which is there in the newspaper. We will try to understand in the coming classes that how print media uses language, and it is how it is so much important to use a proper language, because the relationship between language and media is very important, because media not only affects the language, but it also gets affected uh, by the society's language. So there is a very mutual relationship between media and language, and I'm sure it is going to interest you. So we will see you in the next series, which will be on the contents of print media, and we will try to deal with what is news.